People living in this land 7,000 years ago were already making wine and shoes.
The world's oldest shoe was found right here in this hole.
In the 4th century, Armenia adopted Christianity as its state religion.
Armenians were first Christian nations.
In the early 20th century, Armenians went through the horrors of genocide.
In total, nearly 1.5 million Armenians were killed brutally.
Armenia broke free from the Soviet Union in September 1991. What has independence brought to this ancient country? In 2008, archaeologist Boris Gasparian could have rivaled Armenian politicians in terms of popularity. News of his discovery had spread far and wide throughout the world. In caves in the mountains around the village of Ararat, the archaeologist had found a settlement dating back to the year 5000 BC.
These vessels were among the first finds. When we saw them, it was immediately clear to us that they dated from the Copper and Stone Age. That means that people were already living in these caves 7,000 years ago. Communities maintaining very close contact inhabited an area between the North Caucasus and Mesopotamia. They used to migrate from north to south and south to north.
Excavation work at the site of the ancient settlement has been going on for 3 years now. But archaeologists are still unable to say with certainty what kind of people lived in these caves 7,000 years ago.
Just take a look. You can see a very interesting ritual. The bodies of babies under 1 year of age, they were buried intact. But women, between the ages of 11 and 25, were simply chopped up before burial.
The most interesting artifact was found in the caves in 2008. The world's oldest shoe was dug up from a depth of just half a metre. It's estimated to be about 6,000 years old.
The world's oldest shoe was found right here in this hole. It took us a great deal of effort to get it.
The discovery of the settlement is an event of crucial importance to the small Transcaucasian country. Armenians are proud of the long history of this land, and the find reinforces their pride. In Armenia, there are few other handicrafts that can unite generations as much as the making of hachkars, or tombstones. The art has undergone little change throughout its 1,000-year history. A hammer, chisel and stone are all that's needed for the job. A man and his grandson are working on this hachkar.
I like the job. It is handed down from generation to generation. The one who taught me was my grandfather.
Over the course of his long life, the elderly man has made scores of hachkars. Nowadays, he mentors his grandson in the ways of hachkar sculpting.
There are millions of hachkars here, each with a difference. They differ just as people do. All of the carving patterns are different, even on some particular tombstone. This is to show that the world is imperfect.
Each grave or monastery has its own tailor-made tombstone. Normally, it takes about a month to make one. This cemetery in the village of Noraduz is one of the oldest in Armenia. The long history of this Caucasian country, a history packed with drama, can be traced by looking at the tombstones.
Up until the 7th century, hachkars looked quite simple. There was nothing but a cross atop the first cross stone.
The hachkars in this cemetery don't feature carvings, although the graveyard of the small town of Spitak is much larger.
Before the quake, it was a small cemetery. But as you can see, now it's quite big. It took some 40 days to bury quake victims.
Artur Sarkisyan comes to the cemetery quite often. He always follows the same route in this mournful place. as he moves from one grave to another. On December the 7th, 1988, he lost nearly all of his family. It was 10:40 a.m. when the first tremor, with a magnitude of 7 on the Richter scale, shook Spitak. 30 seconds later, the tiny town was no more, just a pile of rubble.
The main street in the center of the town was here. When the quake struck, there were people in every apartment of the 5-story houses that stood here on both sides of the road. Practically all of them fell apart. Only roofs lying on the asphalt could be seen after the quake.
There is a church where Artur's house once was. More than 20 years on, there are few reminders of that devastating earthquake. But in the cold month of December in 1988, people around the world came to know the name of this small town in Armenia. Aid began pouring in from across the Soviet Union. At that time, Armenia was part of it. The powerful earthquake affected all of Armenia's northern areas, as well as Spitak. The scale of the disaster only became apparent after several days. Just a handful of people had survived under the rubble. The earthquake had claimed 25,000 lives.
When the smoke cleared away 3 or 4 hours after the earthquake, it became clear that the town had been razed to the ground. Aid began arriving towards the evening because there were no roads.
Some of the aid came from numerous diasporas in foreign countries. This footage shows Charles Aznavour, a French singer of Armenian origin, after a visit to devastated Spitak. He vowed to do his best to help Armenia.
I was really shocked by what I saw in Spitak. I couldn't have imagined the appalling scale of that disaster, because so many people were killed here.
The French singer set up a fund for the earthquake-struck country. The money was used to restore dozens of houses in Spitak and Goris, Armenia's second largest town. It too had been affected by the disaster. The town's residents unveiled a monument to Aznavour as a token of gratitude to him.
We unveiled the monument on the 22nd of September in 2002. People from all over Armenia came here. There were also visitors from France.
After the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991, reconstruction work in Armenian towns slowed down. The new houses built in the 3 years after the disaster made up only 1/5 of those destroyed by the earthquake.
We came here on December 2nd. We were given a room on the ground floor and we still live here. Most of the tenants here are refugees.
Garun Ayropetyan and his family also lost their home in December 1988. They became refugees, but not as a result of the earthquake. It was a bloody inter-ethnic conflict that forced them to flee. Armenia is a republic situated in the Trans-Caucasus. It joined the Soviet Union in 1922. When the republic won independence in September 1991, this was the most troubled region in the post-Soviet space. The country was at war with neighboring Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh.
We chop the wood for the winter. And this is our home. These are my grandchildren doing their homework. It's our stove. We've made it ourselves because there's no other source of heating in here.
His house in Azerbaijan's capital of Baku was larger and more comfortable. They had to leave their native city in a hurry. Already there was gunfire in Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijanis were fleeing that area. Meanwhile, the situation for Armenians living in Azerbaijan was becoming increasingly dangerous.
We went through quite a good deal. For instance, my husband had an aunt with a dark complexion. It was easy to see that she was Armenian. She was attacked several times on the metro.
The conflict's root cause stems from the 1920s when Azerbaijan and Armenia joined the Soviet Union. Nagorno-Karabakh, a territory where Armenians had been the predominant population from time immemorial, was placed under Azerbaijan's control. It didn't matter much who controlled Nagorno-Karabakh back then. The Soviet republics were part of an integrated country, but the time bomb eventually went off, and violence erupted between the two in the late 1980s.
The Soviet government showed signs of weakness. With the start of perestroika, when people were told they could speak up without running the risk of being imprisoned or executed, people across the Soviet Union began talking about their concerns. Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh started asking questions. They wanted to know why they were part of Azerbaijan, even though Armenia was next door, a country populated by people of the same nationality and culture.
Baku flatly rejected Yerevan's demand that Nagorno-Karabakh be handed over to Armenia's control. Meanwhile, the first major interethnic conflict was gathering pace in the Soviet Union's south. It had been fueled by events in the small town of Sumgait, near Azerbaijan's capital.
The Sumgait massacre was the point of no return. People were murdered. Mind you, people were killed not in Nagorno-Karabakh itself, but in Sumgait, a town situated far from Nagorno-Karabakh. There is no war now, but there is no peace either. There is no peace treaty.
I'm certainly nostalgic about those times. Here is Nizhny Tagil. I was in the army then. Memories of those days come thick and fast. And this is Baku.
There is a map of the Soviet Union in Garun Ayropetian's workshop. As a tailor, he needs something colourful to rest his eyes on. But the map also gives food for thought. He recalls the days when everybody lived in the same country, a country that later burst at the seams.
This is our peace barrel, which was founded in November in 2001. So it was decided to found the barrel, to call it peace barrel, and to open only when peace will be signed between Azerbaijan and Karabakh.
Nobody at this distillery can say with any certainty when cognac from this barrel will be bottled, but it has every chance of becoming a vintage brand, adding to the distillery's rich collection.
Stalin sent to Churchill 300 bottles of branded wine each year, and that's why they call it diplomatic brandy.
The British Prime Minister was not alone in appreciating this brandy. In Soviet times, Armenian cognac was the main symbol of the Republic. Many agreed that the strong beverage produced in the Trans-Caucasus could easily compete with French cognac manufacturers.
The flavor is intense. You can sense a whole bouquet of flavors. It's a unique beverage. Here I can detect the flavor of our brands, the sunshine of Ararat Valley, and the beauty of our landscapes.
The production process in Armenia and France is totally identical. The spirits are distilled in the same way, and the oak barrels look very much alike. The Armenians are just proud of their product, as the French are of theirs.
I think that cognac is one of the most important and most recognizable brands produced in Armenia. I would even say that it's one of Armenia's symbols.
Mount Ararat can be seen from several spots in Yerevan. The entire history of the Armenian people is linked to it, but it's off limits to Armenians. They can't reconcile themselves with the loss.